My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
Hey, how are you? My name is Ben, and I am a movie buff. I am one part video game nerd, one part comic book nerd, but all parts movie nerd.
Our mission is to bring nerd culture to the masses
by putting it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, TV, manga, comic books, or is that graphic novels, cartoons, websites, animation, Disney, Star Wars, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, and Digimon, and Mighty Morphin, Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Nintendo, Cinematic Universes, Marvel, DC, Justice League, is Batman, Leagues with Superman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Avengers, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, Loki, Spider-Man, and Hulk, and Logan, X-Men, Thunders, Allen, Galaxy Guardians, Star Trek, Trick, Card, and Janeway, Nerds and Geeks come gather around and join them in the Big Bat Jar.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd culture under the microscope.
And we are not throwing away our shot.
Sorry,
I had to say it at least once.
No, it's fine. Like, what we're talking about today, there's a lot of, callbacks and bringing back things that are said before.
That's right.
It's very appropriate you're putting, one of the callbacks in the very beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
Because we'll probably end up, foreshadowing. We'll come back to it again later.
Yep. Yes, that's exactly what I intended.
So as was promised 2 weeks ago, when my brother Dan Hatton pulled Hamilton out of the Bat Jar, we are indeed finally getting to this subject. We are talking about the musical Hamilton. And to do this, we actually brought in some extra help. So we, of course, have Ben the Movie Buff here, who claims to be a big Hamilton fan.
And I am. I am truthful in saying that. So, hey, how are you guys? Good to be back again.
And then this week we have a special guest we kind of pulled out of the reserve army of Bat Jar podcasters we have. She's never been on the show before. This is her first time. So please, Ben the Movie Buff, join me in welcoming Banana Pancakes to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Welcome.
Hey, thanks, guys.
So have you actually listened to this podcast before?
I have.
Hey, we got at least one fan.
Yay.
Do you recall what episodes it was? They were?
Oh, I think I started from the very beginning. I have to admit, though, it was a while ago, but I remember seeing stuff about My Little Pony and a lot of Marvel. So,
yes.
Yep, it was a good place to start.
Cool.
Well, Banana Pancakes, every time we bring a new guest on the show, we want the audience to be kind of familiar with them, find out their secret origin and who they are and all that fun stuff. So we do this in a way that is unique to us. We ask 2 questions. That's it. No more than 2. Not 3, not 0, but 2. So the first question I put before you. What kind of nerd or geek are you?
I'd say a little more than average, particularly on the Marvel and musical side of things. Yeah.
Now, do you identify more as a geek or a nerd? Because this podcast has gotten a lot of debate over the years, defining those 2 words.
I think I would just find myself more as a nerd because I feel like geek is more like sciences.
Ooh.
No?
It's interesting.
Ooh,
there's a lot to it. Yeah, I didn't really learn it until we had that one episode where we talked about it. But yeah, there's lots.
Yeah, so this podcast uses definitions that were kind of generated by Twitter.
Oh.
There was this study done of Twitter, and they looked up all the words that were associated with nerd and geek. And what they found is that generally nerds are interested in STEM, like science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and that I realize we're generalizing here, but dang it, Bat Jar Podcast needs to have definitions.
Yeah.
So for the sake of our show, a nerd is somebody who more or less is interested in more solitary pursuits.
Right.
Like they're not as interested in sharing their fandom with other people. Whereas a geek is much more like a social creature, and they enjoy things like board games and D&D and things that are going out and doing stuff together.
Right.
And that's not to say, if you're an introvert, you have to be a nerd, and if you're an extrovert, you have to be a geek. Like, there's obviously, malleability and crossover between those things. But those are kind of like the general stereotypes we're working with here.
Okay, good to know. With those definitions, with that context, I would say more on the geek side of things then. I switched my answer.
Yes. Final answer.
And you identified musicals and Marvel as your 2 biggest fandoms?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
I believe I heard from a reliable source that you did some giant binging Marvel marathon before Endgame came out.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Well, I have it from a reliable source that you and your sister spent
Yes.
a whole bunch of time before Endgame came out watching all the Marvel movies. Is that true, or am I making that up?
No, that was something we had planned on doing. However, when Star Wars 7 came out, we went to a movie theater where we saw all 6 of them first.
Oh, cool.
And it started at 4 a.m. or something ridiculous like that. And then it ended with the 7th one in the movie theater, half an hour before everybody else saw it. So that was pretty exciting. But that was the only thing that we've really done. We also have a running Disney marathon that has gone for, Disney's the other big one.
Go good.
But it's been running for about, I think 4 years now, where we're watching all of the Walt Disney animated movies in order. So starting with Snow White, ending with the newest one, which is not Moana anymore. And I think we're on Winnie the Pooh, the 2010 version. So we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but...
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is the most recent one. It came out last fall. I don't know if there's been a more recent one.
And that was November 2018.
Yeah.
And then
that would make sense. And then I think Frozen 2 would be the next.
Comes out later on this year.
Yeah.
So I don't, because anything else has either been Pixar or Marvel.
Right.
But I think Disney animated movies, I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is the most recent.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But if you're at 2010, you're still got a ways to go.
That's true.
Yeah.
When we first started it, I think the most recent was Big Hero 6. So,
That's 2014 for those
Yeah.
keeping
That's right.
score at home.
Yeah. That's really cool. Oh, that's awesome.
I'm curious, with the Star Wars thing, did they show them in chronological or release order?
it was chronological.
Okay.
That's very, I would guess that's probably how they do it.
Yep.
There you go. Lesson for all those people having kids now. It's I guess that's the official way to show the Star Wars movies. Now when you finally get to The Empire Strikes Back and Darth Vader says he's Luke's father, it's not shocking at all.
Yeah, I'd be like, yep, next scene, please.
We had a whole movie about this already. This is kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Anyway, that's my way of saying I think they should be shown in release order.
Right, yeah, that's fair. I get that.
But
Yeah.
I
I
digress.
mean, it was nice to sleep during the first one, and then
Oh, snap. Take that, Phantom Menace.
I hope you woke up in time for the lightsaber fight. That's the best part of the
oh
movie.
yeah.
True,
We swapped off sleeping for that one, and
Yeah.
we catch each other on all of the big moments.
So if that was me, I'd sleep for the first 40, 50 minutes, wake up for the pod race scene, then after that, go back to bed, and then wake up for Duel of Fates, and then go back to bed, and then wake up at some point in Attack of the Clones. But then for the next big action scene, the next big highlight, really.
Exactly.
Okay, so what kind of nerd or geek? I guess you've identified yourself as a geek now.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of geek do you want to be?
Ooh, well, I was a very big one in high school, and then for the past year, it's kind of subsided. So I think I would like to just find out more knowledge about it, get to know more musicals in particular. I know there's been a lot of ones that have become
Popularized.
yeah, that I'd really like to just check out and see what all of the hype is about. So definitely that's on my to-do list.
So wait, how are you going to check out a musical? You're either going to a library or a hotel. I don't get it.
What do you mean?
Check out?
Oh,
Oh my.
not like that.
Check out on YouTube, maybe listen to the music, and then.
Spotify mostly.
Spotify,
Gonna be
no, that's
honest.
fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spotify and Wikipedia are my best friends when it comes to that.
But no, that's great. We're happy to have you here, Banana Pancakes, and it's nice to, again, have somebody who's more of an expert. Maybe, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see who's the bigger expert here.
I would guess you. I mean, I love Hamilton, but I'm not sure I'm well versed. But we'll see. Who
Okay,
knows?
we'll see.
So Hamilton is a musical.
This is the story of someone who wrote his way out of his circumstances and then wrote his way to self-destruction. I thought, this is Tupac, this is Biggie, this is a hip-hop story. This is my next show.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot.
Alexander Hamilton is one of the unsung heroes of our country.
He was a brilliant man and a daring man who had a vision.
Hamilton had the core idea about an aggressive role for government that enriches us all.
Well, the word got around. They said,
Mr. President,
When you told us, I'm going to do a rap about Alexander Hamilton, we said, well, good luck with that.
Hamilton has this incredible drive, this incredible inventiveness. He's so relentless. It forces you to reckon with, well, what am I doing with my life?
We have talked about musicals on this show before. We've talked about movies that have come out that are musicals, mostly Disney movies, or as you pointed out earlier, the My Little Pony movie. We did a whole episode on movie musicals, and that episode kind of addressed just the general challenges that come with taking something that was made for stage and trying to adapt it to film. And I think the coolest way to always start these conversations, talking about something specific, is getting into like how we each discovered the topic in question. So we'll start with you, Banana Pancakes. How did you first get exposed or find out about Hamilton?
It was through my sister. I remember it was a night in March. It was cold and it was wintry out, and I was doing my laundry, and my sister was like, "Hey, I found this really cool musical." And I was like, not right now, Becca. Like, I'm doing laundry. Yeah, so anyways, so then she ended up showing me a few of the songs. I think we got up to like the fifth one. It's escaping me right now. Skylar's Sister, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the fifth. Yeah.
And so after that, it was over the course of several months, actually. I would take a chunk of time and I would look up the lyrics as I listened to it so I could have more of an understanding what's going on, because some of the lyrics are really fast, and if you don't have it, Guns and Chips right there. So I kept up with it. And then as I would go along, I would listen to the songs that I had already known, just kind of like, just for enjoyment, getting to know them more. So it wasn't until probably July when I finally got to the end of the show, really. And again, I was driving with my sister out to my grandpa's farm, and we got to the end, and I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but my sister and I were driving out and tears streaming down our faces, because I had spent so much time getting invested in these characters.
Yeah.
But had no idea how their story ended, so it wasn't just like a sit down for 2.5 hours, listen to it. But I'd
American history.
Also true. I was homeschooled, so American politics weren't really my thing.
Yeah, I hear you.
But anyways, so I'd spent months just like investing in these characters, and so it was really a beautiful kind of like way to top it all off. But how about yourselves?
Yeah, you go, Ben.
Should I go next? Yeah, okay. So Hamilton was one of those kind of interesting experiences where sometimes with special things like Hamilton, for example, you kind of get into it, you get hooked instantly, and then 2.5 hours later, you're a huge fan, and all you want to do is listen to Hamilton and talk about Hamilton. For me, for some reason, it took me a few tries to get into Hamilton. I remember my dad, who is really big into musicals, although I don't think the kind of musical style of Hamilton is exactly down his alley, but I remember him hearing about it and hearing like how well it was doing on Broadway and the music behind it, and the guy Lin-Manuel Miranda, who I'd never heard of before until Hamilton, the creative genius behind it. So I heard my dad talking about that, and I thought to myself, okay, this sounds pretty cool. I'll give it a try. And I was working on something, and I listened to the first 8 minutes right before they get into the "I'm Not Gonna Throw Away My Shot" song, and I thought it was fine. But for some reason, I paused it, and then I did something else, and I didn't listen to the rest. 4 or 5 months later, someone else brought up Hamilton. I thought to myself, I started listening to that, and I didn't get that far. I need to try again, start from the beginning, right, and try and get into the story and listen to the music. And I started to listen to it again. But once again, I didn't get that far. I might have gotten slightly farther, and then I stopped. And then, fast forward a year after that, I had like a free day, and I thought to myself, I've tried twice to listen to this musical. It hasn't happened. Someone else brought it up, and I'm like, I'm going to listen to this musical finally from point A to point B. And I listened to it, and then something just clicked. Because after listening to Hamilton that day, from start to finish, I joined my friend my best friend Riley there. We were driving from Toronto, and I was like, man, I listened to this musical yesterday. It's called Hamilton. Have you heard of it? And then he's like, no. And I'm like, I'm going to play you 2 songs. I'm going to play you the opening one, Alexander Hamilton, and then I'm going to play Not Throwing Away My Shot. And for some reason, we couldn't get it hooked up to a stereo system, so I played it off of my phone. But even then, like, it was just... Yeah, like it moved me. Like some of the songs are really catchy, some of the songs are really moving. I love it so much, and I did what Banana Pancake was mentioning earlier about listening to the songs and reading through the lyrics, because like the song "I'm Not Throwing Away My Shot" I love, but if you were to ask me to recite some of the lyrics, I'd be like la 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 la, and then there's this part, and then there's that, because there's so much to it. But when you actually sit down and read it, it's actually pretty incredible. There's so much. There's so many lyrics, and there are little things here and there that you have to look up to gain a better understanding. So finally, after listening to it in late fall of 2017, I was hooked, and my brother and I would talk about it nonstop, and we'd listen to it and jam out and whatnot. It's so great.
So to clarify, neither of you have actually seen this play.
Not yet.
No.
Oh, I like that answer. Not yet. That would imply that
Give it a year or two, even if it costs a fair amount. I'm going to see it at some point because I would love this to just see it and hear it instead of just hearing it and imagining it.
I think I have, obviously, of the three of us, I have the shortest history with Hamilton.
But still do tell.
I only started listening to the music like 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I kept putting it off. Like, I've known for a while now we're going to talk about this, and I've just kept putting it off, and then finally I was like, okay, I got no choice. I got to actually give this old puppy a listen. I think the first time I remember actually hearing about Hamilton was when I'm a big frequent follower of like the Flash TV show, and as early as like the second season of the Flash, they made reference to getting Hamilton tickets.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is a thing that's going on in pop culture right now. I'm just not familiar with. And not too long after that, the movie Moana came out, which everyone who's listened to the show knows I'm a huge fan of. And, you know, of course, knowing me, I like getting into the background, like who's involved in making the movie. And, of course, all the articles I'm reading say, Lin-Manuel Miranda, famous for Hamilton. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is the guy who's done that Hamilton thing. And I never really gave it much more attention than that. Like, I know Lin-Manuel Miranda more from Moana, Mary Poppins, and his appearance on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Than I do for anything related to Hamilton. So I finally gave the music a listen to the other day, and I've watched some people talk about it on YouTube, so I'm as ready as I'm going to be for this conversation. As it always is, I like to find out why things happen the way they are, or why they happen the way they did, I should say. So I was curious, like, what drove this man to actually make this musical? And the story goes, apparently he read a biography of the man himself, Alexander Hamilton. What I find interesting, it was a book that was published in 2004, simply called Alexander Hamilton, written by historian Ron Chernow. Sorry, Ron, if I'm saying your name wrong. But I guess Lin-Manuel felt that the story of Alexander Hamilton was the story of hip-hop. So his impression of hip-hop music, I don't know if I buy into this personally, but his impression of hip-hop music is that's about like rising above where you are right now. And so after reading this book, he was like, the story of Alexander Hamilton is the story of hip-hop. Therefore, the story of Alexander Hamilton must be told through hip-hop. Do you guys agree with that kind of thesis or that idea?
I'm not 100% sure at the moment, but what I will say is I think sometimes the smartest people are the ones that can look at something and see something different that no one else sees. How many times have people had a really cool idea, like George Lucas having the idea for Star Wars and going to all these different studios and saying, I have this idea for Star Wars, and a lot of people saying, yeah, no thanks. I'm sure that's great. You can make your own little sci-fi film elsewhere. And then did they realize how wrong they were to turn him down? And I think Lin-Manuel Miranda looking at this and saying, oh, like he embodies hip-hop, as silly as it may sound, like clearly there was some part of that idea that worked, because if it didn't, why would Hamilton be the phenomenon that it is today? So I'm not sure if I agree with it, but he's clearly onto something, because he's clearly made something special out of this.
Yeah, and from my understanding too, like one of his big things was he wanted to make it accessible to people, right? Like you often hear these stories of the founding fathers and it's so out of date and there's all of this stuff going on and you're just not into it. But what he really tried to do, especially with the hip hop side of it, is how can I bring this story of the founding fathers into a way that will engage people, that will help them understand, that they'll be drawn into their story, really. And I remember him, in an interview I read a while ago or something like that, he was talking about how in high school, like Lin-Manuel Miranda wanted to be a filmmaker. And I mean, he grew up in New York, he had seen a few shows, different stories, whatever. But when he saw Rent, that was the first time he had seen a stage musical really portrayed in a way that he could understand it and that it was accessible to him. And so he wanted to bring that to other people as well. So I think there was just all of the connections in his mind, and so out it came.
That's awesome.
So would you agree hip-hop is the story of Alexander Hamilton?
I think in the history of hip-hop, there definitely is a lot of like perseverance in it. And you definitely see that with Alexander Hamilton, and there's a lot of drive with it as well that is definitely present in his character.
Oh, yeah.
So there's definitely correlations. However, I wouldn't know, to be quite honest, I don't know enough about the history of hip hop to really say whether or not it's it's exactly on par, but I would definitely say that there's correlations.
What I find interesting about the history of this production is that in 2009, Lin-Manuel Miranda, for whatever reason, was invited to this like open spoken word poetry thing at the White House. I don't know how he got the invitation. Maybe Obama knew about him or whatever, but he came to this poetry night at the White House and performed an early version of what became the first song in the play Hamilton.
Yep.
The I guess the title song.
Yeah.
The one with Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, the intro kind of.
And apparently, as he performed, I mean, I saw a clip of it, so I can validate this. But as he was performing the song, people were laughing.
Yeah.
So clearly, like that place and time in 2009, to see someone do like this hip hop inspired take on an American founding father was ludicrous. Not to make a hip hop reference, but it seemed really silly to some people.
Yeah, and I think too, choosing a relatively obscure character, like he was known as the treasurer of America, right? Like you wouldn't pick someone like Thomas Jefferson or Madison or George Washington even. Like those are all characters within the story, but they're supporting characters for Hamilton, and so I think it's really interesting how he specifically chose that character who was relatively obscure and really brought him into the limelight and told his story.
What I love about the video is that I think it reminds us that all of the people nowadays, whether it be Lin-Manuel Miranda or like a filmmaker or a singer or any kind of celebrity that has gained fame through some sort of means, most, if not all of them, had to start from somewhere, right? Like it's very humbling actually to watch this video where Lin-Manuel Miranda, if I remember correctly, he says, I am going to, I'm doing and at the time, he was going to do a concept album about Alexander Hamilton. It wasn't a Broadway show yet. It wasn't until a bit later on that I think he met with someone and they said you should really do this as a show. But the way he kind of delivered it, where he's like, I'm going to sing a song about someone who embodies hip hop, a founding father, Alexander Hamilton, and everyone laughed, and you could see he got a little bit defensive, but he still did the song. He still snapped his fingers, got into it. The person who's playing piano got into it. And I think it's really inspiring to show that at the time people laughed, and then at the Tonys, all these years later when Hamilton was doing so well that Michelle and Barack Obama had a little segment where they're like, Lin-Manuel Miranda came to perform one of these songs back in 2009, and we all laughed, but who's laughing now? And it shows he would rise up. Another reference to the musical. Rise up. And it's incredible. It's incredible that something like that, something so small, became what it is today.
Yeah, the video I watched did this very poignantly, where they kind of faded from the video of him saying Alexander Hamilton and to then fade into like the 2016 Grammys, where they did the same performance, and as soon as he goes Alexander Hamilton, it like bursts into applause.
Everyone
and cheers.
Freaks out, man. Oh. Even I watched like a brief clip of like one of the actual performances when Lin-Manuel Miranda was Alexander Hamilton, and it's a great lead up, right? Because all these characters come in and saying different things, and then one of the characters says, "What's your name, man?" And then he just comes out and Alexander Hamilton, and the audience just loses their minds. And I know when I see it in a few years, I'm gonna lose my mind too. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
So this is an example of a sing-through musical. Yep. Which refers to for those who aren't in the know, it refers to a musical where basically there's no dialogue that's spoken, like there's no just straight talking. It means like this whole musical is sung. And I'm not a huge Broadway person. Like I said, I've only been there once. But I think this is probably the first musical I can recall that includes hip-hop music.
Yeah, I believe it was the first one. There was definitely ones that had the sort of influence of hip-hop, I would say. Particularly some newer ones, but it was the first like full hip-hop Broadway musical, which was really unique.
So what I found interesting is like I only started listening to the music, like I said, 2 days ago, and immediately like I found myself humming along, and that line of Alexander Hamilton is like stuck in my head now. I can't get it out. Right. The songs move so fast with the lyrics that I haven't spent enough time with them to like I can kind of like imagine like the sound in my head, but in terms of the words, it's like unless I have a lyric sheet in front of me, there's no way I can follow along. So I'm not super invested yet. I'll admit I'm starting to like see why it's such a huge thing.
Yep.
This is a musical that's cut up into 2 acts instead of 3. And it basically, like we said, is the story of Alexander Hamilton, who was a founding father and had, like you said, a more supporting role in the big story, but then he's the central character of his own story. And the video I watched kind of explained that the play kind of shows the story of his friendship, rivalry, and opposition to this guy named Aaron Burr.
Yep.
And it sort of shows how Aaron initially is, I guess, jealous of the fact that Hamilton just takes action. He doesn't overthink things. But then as time goes on, that kind of comes back to bite him in the behind.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that, again, I'm going really hard off of this video this guy had that I watched, because he emphasized that there's a lot of musical motifs in Hamilton. He basically he identified at least 11 that kind of like come back, and he points out that in like the final song, all of the different motifs somehow are integrated into like the final song. And to me, that just seems like, again, I'm not a musical expert. I'm not a musician. I'm not even a very good singer. But I can imagine how difficult it would be to try and create like all these different songs, but then also find ways for the different songs to like kind of sneak into the other songs. So I'm curious what you guys think about the music, because that's obviously a big reason why this thing's so successful.
So I would say I'm not... While I love music, I don't know if I'm one that's like studied music intensely enough to be able to like go into great detail. But I'll say what I know, given about like how I feel about the
Use your
music.
feelings.
I will. I will. Watch me go. But I think the reason why I love the music, there's a few reasons. But so the first one is that many of the songs are very memorable. Many of the songs are very catchy. I would say the My Shot song is my favorite. Alexander Hamilton is a close second. The World Turned Upside Down, the Battle of Yorktown, is also high up there too. So I think it helps that a lot of these songs, even though they tend to reference other songs, are very memorable, right? Like you hear those opening lyrics for "I'm not throwing away my shot," and it's just it's there for good, and you're not forgetting it anytime soon. And the tricky thing is, in a musical where it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes long, that's a lot of music to write. Like there's so much. So I think it helps to, while you're writing all this music, to kind of keep in mind, how do you keep it exciting and fresh from one song to the next? And I think one of the ways is by kind of referencing the songs. One part that stands out to me that I thought was really cool when I first listened to it was, you know, at the beginning, Alexander Hamilton introduces himself by saying, "Alexander Hamilton." And then in the Schuyler Sisters song, Eliza goes, "Eliza." And then when the two of them meet and they introduce themselves, they refer to themselves the same way that they did in their introductory songs. And that's really cool, because it brings you back to those songs. And you're like, that's cool. Like they're keeping that. They could have just very well sung it differently, but it's like, why not reference what happened earlier as a way to show that, and in the way they sing it to each other kind of says something about their personalities, I would think, hence why they sing it that way. But really, every time you look at the songs, you kind of see how he's kind of doing something different with them, right? Like the way that the Alexander Hamilton song at the beginning is done is very different from "I'm Not Throwing Away My Shot." It's also very different to the, I think, Farmer Refuted song later on, or the one where Samuel Seabury comes in to kind of give this news, and Alexander's kind of fighting him, and they have these kind of certain words that they share, but then they go off and say, like, it's really cool musically what they do, what he does song after song after song. And I think that's what keeps it fresh and exciting, is that it's not just like, here's a song and here's another song and here's a song. Like there's a lot of depth to it, and I think that's what really stands the test of time, is really interesting music, and not just the basic, this is a song and here's my song, right? There's something more to it.
And there's so many different styles too. Like one of the songs that I think of is towards the end, as they're writing each other's back and forth, and it's essentially all of the tension that leads up to them going to a duel. The music in that is more of a minuet. It's more of a dance, and so it's showing the dance that has been happening throughout the whole musical between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, and kind of their different philosophies on life. Alexander Hamilton's being, you know, you have to fight for what you want, you have to push through, you have to keep on going like nonstop. Whereas Aaron Burr's is much more, you know, he has a whole song about it, like wait for it, kind of wait and see what are all of the different contexts, the different people, what their motives are, and kind of hold back and not show what I'm doing. And yeah, these contrasting philosophies on life, they build and they build and they build over the course of their life, up until this moment where they're writing these letters back and forth and doing this dance, and you can kind of see it in the words that they write to each other. Your obedient servant. There's almost this like the assassin between them, and these hidden messages, which like it's very typical of a minuet. I feel and just with the the tempo that it is and all of that, it's 1 2 3 1 2 3, almost like a waltzing, and it eventually leads to their duel, and it's fascinating.
I think what's really cool is that even though there's a lot going on, like Hamilton is not one of those like, oh, you could be reading a book and listen to it and like still get the same understanding. Like, it helps to pay attention. Just the way Banana Pancake that you were talking about, their differences. For me, it's like it can be, even though there's a lot of complexity to it, the starting point is like for Alexander Hamilton, like he's not going to throw away his shot, and for Aaron Burr, it's talk less, smile more, and like that's like a starting point that kind of delves deeper into how they differ. But it's brilliant. I could sing Hamilton's praises all night.
And I like what you said earlier, is that it is. I was under the impression going to this that it was just all rap, and that the whole musical was just them rapping. And I was like, all right, whatever. I'm sure it looks weird, people in colonial era clothes rapping the whole time. But like they have all these different styles, and it's like it's not just hip hop rap. There's like blues, and there's R&B, and there's like kind of even show tuney kind of stuff. Like and there are some like there's like mixtures of them too. Like it'll be like a big song and dance number, but then there's the rap in there too, and it's just like and it does things really fast, and then it goes back to this. It's like I don't know. There's a level of creativity there that definitely you don't see in other, at least that I haven't seen other musicals.
Yeah, right.
And what's interesting is like none of us have actually seen this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen clips on YouTube. That's the closest I've gotten to actually watching anything.
Yep.
So
thanks, YouTube.
So clearly, like, there's something about the music, because like the stories you guys shared, how you discovered and fell in love with this property, is through the actual music. You weren't watching like a TV show about the Hamilton musical.
Yeah.
You were just purely, all you had was the auditory experience of the music. So obviously, there is something to be said about the music. And, even if we had easy access to viewings of the darn thing, it seems like it's a hot commodity. Like it's sold out while it was in Broadway, and it started performing, I guess, off Broadway in 2015, and then starting in 2016, it did a trip in Chicago. 2017, a U.S. tour, and now apparently they're doing a third U.S. tour in 2019. So it is starting to make the rounds. Like more people are getting the chance to actually like see the thing. And I can't help but wonder, like it probably, with all the different styles of music involved, it probably isn't the easiest musical to put on.
Oh, no kidding. And let's remember too that like you said, Average Joe, that it's a sing-through musical. Like off the top of my head, and if you guys can think of any others, let me know. But I think Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is a sing-through musical. I think Les Mis, I'm pretty sure, is also a sing-through musical, because I was in both of those in high school, and I don't recall there being any scenes of dialogue. But I mean, typically you have your dialogue scenes, but you're kind of singing through it as music is playing. So I think, that's really the tricky thing, is that Hamilton is basically 2 hours and 20 minutes of music. And yes, certain songs are reprised, but that's still a lot of music. Like when I think about some of my favorite Disney movies, and I think about like some of the songs that I like, it's actually kind of crazy to think about. Little Mermaid has great music, but when you think about it, I think Hamilton probably has like 10 times the amount of music that Little Mermaid does, because Little Mermaid has 4 or 5 songs. Yeah. And then Hamilton comes along and it has song after song after song that, like I said, keeps things interesting, and like there's kind of a new exciting trick with every song that keeps it going. Even like the Story of Tonight, to me, kind of reminds me of something like a song you might hear in a musical from the 80s or 90s that sounds like something from a classical musical, whereas I'm Not Throwing Away My Shot sounds like, like an all-out rap ballad that sounds like something more modern. But I think that's what helps it stay fresh, is the different styles of music, and that it never feels like one style overstays its welcome.
This is not like a textbook. The story here, it's like it's based on true events, but there's like any kind of biopic-y sort of story, there are parts in which it deviates from the actual history. But even still, even though it's like not entirely accurate, it seems as though one of the great successes of Hamilton as a musical is that it's made American history accessible to a lot of young people and others who would have no interest in American history. There was a video I watched of him him being Lin-Manuel, talking about Hamilton, saying like part of why they cast all these, we'll say historically appropriate actors in the parts is because it allowed the youth of America today to see themselves represented in American history.
Yeah, as well, I've heard him say, like, having people of color in the play, like Alexander Hamilton himself was an immigrant. He was from the Caribbean. He came to New York. And so his story, too, is one of, like, an immigrant rising to the top, which is so relevant for a lot of people these days. And like, that's a lot of people's stories coming into it. And one of the reasons why it's become such a cultural phenomenon, really, is just taking what is true today and what was true then and kind of meshing the two.
He was quoted as saying, "We're telling the story of old, dead white men, but we're using actors of color. And that makes the story more immediate and more accessible to a contemporary audience."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like I was saying earlier, how sometimes, and I mean, this doesn't always work, but it seems to me that if you kind of take the safe approach and you do things in a certain way, they're like, oh, let's just cast white actors, or let's just do this way that people expect us to, that sometimes it makes things less interesting. But when you kind of take a risk, when you say, let's hire different people, let's do things this way, let's sing through this story through rap and hip-hop and rock and this and that, sometimes it's those chances that are more rewarding when you take them, whereas if you don't, I mean, I've seen like lots of movies that are fine, but sometimes like they're safe, and they seem to be a little less interesting when they're safe. When they take risks, when they're more dangerous, that's when they tend to be more interesting, even if they don't work out. I can still applaud them for trying to do something different. So I can imagine why Lin-Manuel Miranda would want to try and connect the history to the present, and also do something that maybe some people will kind of balk and be like why would they do that? He's got his reasons.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to like Alexander himself. He was a man who took a lot of risks, who didn't do the easy thing, who kept on pushing, kept on going, thought outside the box. And so I think it's very relevant, especially to his story, to have that way of storytelling as well.
I think I can get behind the whole recoloring history in that sense, or like, choosing to interpret these historical events in this way, because if it helps young Americans identify with their history in that way, then more power to them. And apparently that's used, like Hamilton the musical has actually gotten a lot of, again, like there people are talking about in schools now as like a resource for teaching history. And as long as you can help the students understand that this isn't like, this doesn't replace your textbook.
Right.
It's like my history teacher showed us a lot of movies as well.
Right.
But he made a point of showing us like how the films were. Like there's that movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
And he showed us that in American history class, and he made a point of like having a whole like kind of classroom. Okay, here are all the things that are inaccurate about this movie based on its time period and whatnot. So I guess it's good that Hamilton's being used in a educational context, with the caveat as long as they're actually like not teaching this as straight history.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get into that today because we're not historians. We're not going to get into all the ways in which the story is different. But what I kind of want to have a conversation with you guys about is this idea of Hamilton's impact and its popularity and its fandom. I was just looking here on Wikipedia. Apparently, in 2015, the American government was going to replace Hamilton on the $10 bill. There were plans to replace Hamilton with an undecided woman from American history.
I remember all of the outrage.
And apparently, due to the immense success of the musical, they reversed their decision and then decided to replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill with Harriet Tubman.
Wow.
I'll
be honest, I've never heard of this before, so that's pretty cool, actually.
We're Canadians, so like I don't exactly have a stash of American money to stare at.
I mean, I have American relatives, but none of them told me about this. I'm going to have to ask them about it.
So you heard about this when it happened?
Oh, yeah. I actually remember going on social media and seeing that, and I was like, they're replacing Alexander Hamilton? I was so defensive over it, even though I'm not even from America.
I think that says something, though, that when a piece of pop culture is so popular that it can change the decisions of the government. Yeah. That says something. Like, I don't think... I'm trying to think if there's anything Marvel or Disney or Star Wars or whatever could do on the with that level of impact.
Yeah, that's right, huh?
And this gets into this whole fandom that's crept up around Hamilton, because I found out about it because Hamilton just had this massive presence, and it started to invade my nerd culture. It started to invade The Flash and Supergirl and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and like all these characters are making references to Hamilton tickets and Hamilton. It's like Hamilton. Everywhere I turned, it just kept showing up. So clearly, it's doing something. So I'm curious, as you guys who are clearly much more love with this thing than me, why is this thing such a big thing, and why are there so many fans?
You should go first.
Oh man, yeah, I think there's a lot. I think what it boils down to is just very well put together storytelling that a lot of people can relate to, and it was definitely the first of its kind. We talked about it being the first musical that was hip hop. It was the first one that really casted people of color in roles of like founding fathers who would have been white middle-aged men. And so it was really, in a sense, countercultural to the musical world. But I think what a lot of people were craving, or at least I myself, hear a lot of talk about inclusivity, being talked about a lot, especially on social media. It's a very hot topic thing. And it was just really pretty much the first of its kind. So yeah, I think it just kind of caught people off guard, and it really just exploded.
I'm going to make a strange comparison here because I think I've already talked about the music and how interesting it is to listen to, and the fast-paced lyrics, and really the music is why I got into Hamilton. But let's back up to 1977 when this little sci-fi film came out called Star Wars. And it seems to me that it's quite possible that if Star Wars, maybe it comes out 10 years earlier, maybe it comes out 10 years later, I think it's still possible that this still would have been a big movie. But you got to wonder, with certain things like Star Wars and Hamilton and other big forms of entertainment, sometimes they just come out at the right time, right? Star Wars came out, and I have watched so many interviews with filmmakers who were teenagers or in their early 20s saying yeah, I went to go see this movie called Star Wars, and I was blown away, and I wanted to become a filmmaker, right? And it just kind of came out at the right time that everyone wanted a piece of it, everyone loved it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the whole Broadway scene, if we're talking about musicals that started out as musicals and that were not Disney movies, were not movies that eventually became musicals on Broadway, I seem to recall Wicked being a big one that I heard a lot about when it was on Broadway. I'd never seen it. I'd listened to the Defying Gravity song and one of the other songs, but Wicked was a big musical that I'd heard about, and it was from other people because they listened to it and loved it so much. So it seems to me that after Wicked, the next musical that came from Broadway that was not a movie or this or that or based on a pre-existing, I guess it is based on that book, but where it exploded was Broadway. It seems to me Hamilton was just another one that was so big that all these people would listen to it, hadn't seen it, but said, this is awesome. And because I kept on hearing about it time and time again. And like you said, Banana Pancake, it seems to me that, yeah, it is doing something different. It's not so much that it's it's just basic catchy songs. It's the really cool style. It's the fact that Lin-Manuel Miranda took this guy and said, he is the embodiment of hip-hop, and everyone says, ha, 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 what? And he says, let me show you. And by the end of the musical, you're yeah, okay, I can kind of see why you would think that, and I've been connected to the story, and I've really liked the music. So I think it's just one of those musicals that also took a shot in a number of different ways and didn't play it safe, because I don't know if you guys have heard, but I think that there's a musical, from the 50s or 60s called 1776, and if I remember correctly, I think it actually it has some of the same characters. It deals with the Declaration of Independence and America's founding fathers and whatnot. In fact, Hamilton might actually have a bit role in that musical too, but that musical is very much like musicals of the time, right? It's more similar to something like Les Mis or I don't know, just the older musicals of the 70s and 80s, whereas something like Hamilton really feels like something like the first of its kind, and I think that clearly resonated with people.
Yeah, 1776 came out in 1969, so you're right on the
line. 1969, there we go. Yeah, just because my mom's a huge fan of it, and I've watched it once or twice, but oddly enough, I remember one of the songs from 1776, but it's not I'm sure as great as it is, I don't think it was accessible the way that Hamilton was, to be quite frank.
Yeah, there's something to be said there about this idea of the opportunity window wherein, like you said, right place, right time.
Yeah.
And like I can think of any number of successful films or movies that just happen to come out at the right time. Like, like Smallville came out for the first time a month after 9/11. And it did really well in the ratings initially because it's like America was just like, we just want a hero. And
yeah,
so
that's
like Smallville
right.
gave you a hero on television.
Yeah.
The Tim Burton Batman movie, it
That's
took
right.
10 years to get that movie made.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had gotten it any earlier, it probably wouldn't have had the same impact that it did.
That's
and,
right.
And even with Hamilton, from my understanding, it took Lin-Manuel like a year just to write the first song.
Yeah.
And it took like another year to write the second song.
Yeah.
And so it's like as if he knew that like Wicked was still a big thing and needed like more of a window to actually come in at the right time, because it did take him like 6 years to actually, and I can see why.
Oh, absolutely. Jeez Louise. I mean, you look at some of the lyrics and yeah, you got to imagine him like, spending like a couple hours, and it's like, okay, there we go. This line. Okay, done. Now, 70 more lines to go. You can imagine, and I mean, I've tried to write lyrics for songs before, and yeah, it's not easy, and they're nowhere near as complicated as a lot of Lin-Manuel Miranda's lyrics.
And I think, too, like, he had so many other projects on the go. He was in episodes for random different shows. I know he was on Sesame Street randomly.
Yep. He was on one episode of How I Met Your Mother, too. I remember that.
Yeah, and he actually had another musical before this as well called Into the Heights, which also would have been a big project that he was working on, and so he had all of this stuff on the go. It would have just been a lot, but you can also tell the time and the dedication that he put into this particular piece of work. I really think it was almost in a sense like his brainchild, like his piece to top it all off. Well, obviously he's done many more things. You talked about Moana, Average Joe. And he's still constantly doing new things, but I think he really poured a lot of himself into this. Himself being from a family where his parents were immigrants from Puerto Rico, he kind of grew up in that atmosphere. I think there was a lot of him put into this story as well.
It definitely seems like the kind of musical that he probably, like, it's funny, you hear sometimes, like, I think there was a fact where the guy who wrote Basic Instinct apparently, like, listened to Rolling Stones nonstop, and then over 4 days came up with the rough draft of Basic Instinct, and you're like, wow, okay. But something like Hamilton, it's like, there's no way he was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to spend like 1 week and like have the whole thing. Like, he probably spent so much time trying to figure everything out and make it work the way it does. Like, stuff like this is not easy, and it clearly doesn't happen overnight.
And even in different points in his life, I remember looking on Genius.com at the different lyrics and kind of the stories behind some of them. When he wrote the song that Alexander sings to his son right after he's born, and Aaron Burr is singing to his daughter, he actually mentioned that was a big moment in his life. He wrote it, I believe it was a week after he got his dog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not even before he had his child, but when he had his dog, and even though like his child wasn't born yet, like he still was able to, I guess, conjure up those feelings and like put that into the song itself.
Yeah.
And given that it happened over the course of so many years, I'm sure there was many instances where he wrote down what he was feeling and was like, oh, this would probably be a good correlation for what he's going through in this song.
Yeah. That's the cool thing about the creative process, right? Is that, for one, some stories like take a very long time to figure out whether you're writing it or directing it. And then on top of that, there can just be times where it's what they call like the wall, right? Like a writer hits the wall and they're not sure how to get around it to keep on, like, to come up with that good idea to keep the scenes flowing. And it's funny how sometimes you just need to step back and you need to do something else for a little while, and then it hits you and you go, wait, here's how we take care of it. Here's how we solve that problem. And then it's funny how one idea can lead to the next. So I can imagine, lots of times where he was probably writing and then just needed a break, and then he either gets his dog or something else happens, and he's like, okay, I think I know how to proceed, because it can, it takes up a lot of brain power to try and figure out like all the different ways that you could take a scene, that you could take a song or lyrics, and figuring out what's the best way to make this work. I think he figured it out clearly, because we all want a piece of it.
And hearing that basically it was kind of autobiographical in the sense that he infused parts of his own story into it, I think that just further cements the reality of it being a passion project, and that he put a lot of himself into it. And again, my thing is I feel like it really is the quality of the music that has created this fan base, because as you guys are shining examples of this, you are people who have not seen the show,
Yeah.
but you have developed an attachment to this, I'll say, franchise.
Yep.
Purely based on just listening to the music. And this is music that's written for a musical, which is supposed to be an audio and visual experience, right? There's the dancing and the costumes and the sets and the music that is all meant to play together.
Yeah.
You only have like 1/3 of that, and you're still getting an emotional reaction to it. So obviously there's a lot to be said about the actual just music itself, which I think we've already kind of hammered home, but just in case in case that isn't clear.
Yeah, and even you look at what came after, like the mixtapes happened, which was a project that came after Hamilton was on Broadway for, I believe it was about a year, maybe it was a bit longer, where Lin-Manuel Miranda actually worked with a number of different artists. Kelly Clarkson was one of them. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. But he worked with a number of different ones and essentially rewrote the songs, or had different themes, and they would write a song based off of that theme. And so even from that, you see how the music from the musical then translates into more passion projects where he's getting other people involved, and they're reworking the songs and having new spins on them.
Yeah, it seems to me that, and let's remember here that music is is a pretty old art form, right? Like, like music has been around way longer than film, than TV, than photography. So I think it says a lot to the his ability and his skill as a writer and as a musician to bring all of this music together. Because let's face it, like, you have songwriters that write music, that are musicians. You have music for movies, you have music for TV, you have music for video games. Like, there's so many different ways we can use music. So it's difficult. Like, if you were to give me an hour to try and come up with like a new interesting song, I would probably have nothing for you, because any ideas that I would have would be things that have been done before. But there are plenty of great examples in Hamilton where like the music is just so interesting to listen to. And like My Shot is a great example in the way that, he starts singing, then the other guys kind of get together and they start singing, and like all the different parts, like it's not a typical chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, kind of like it's very interesting in the way that it's structured. And I think, when you can do something to rise above the rest of like everyone else that has like those basic songs that you forget in 5 minutes, then clearly you have a hit on your hands, like he did and currently has right now.
So I think we can kind of like put a summary on this little tweet, if you will, to say that Hamilton has this huge fan base because it has excellent music that has the ability, the superpower almost, to connect with people of all ages, races, and it allows people who haven't even seen the darn musical to actually like feel an emotional connection to it. As a kind of like I have two things I want to do to sum up the conversation. First of all, what is your favorite song from Hamilton?
My Shot, or Not Throwing Away My Shot, however they.
And why is that your favorite?
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. And it will just like my country, I'm young, scrappy and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot.
I think I've said it earlier, and I'll say it again, that I just think it's the most musically interesting. It's really catchy. I love the way it builds. I love the rise up part towards the end. I love how all the voices come together and finish it off. I also love the bit where like a lot of the characters come in, and like Lafayette, for example, he's like, I dream of life without the anarchy, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then by the time he finishes his part, everyone goes, shot, and then someone else comes in, and then it kind of, sings their part. It's just, it's fascinating to listen to. It is endlessly catchy.
Banana Pancakes. I know this is probably hard for you.
More than you know.
I guess so.
I wasn't expecting this question. I should have, but I wasn't.
I'll go first if that gives you more time to think.
Yeah,
it's pretty simple for me. Like, that's the thing. I've listened.
Which of the five do you like, Joe?
Like, I've listened to the whole soundtrack once, but it's like I was doing other things.
Right.
Because I was at work, It's like I can't just sit there and listen to the musical all day.
Multitasking. That's fine. We get it.
But I know I'm going to sound like a real lame-o, but like the only song that I can remember more than like 2 words of is either the one where it's like, run around. What's that one?
Skylar
the Skylar Sisters song?
We ought to be alive right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's got to be like just the intro song. It's the only one I know it's probably like everyone's like cringing in their seats right now, but it's like that's the one I can remember the most from. And
my name is Alexander Hamilton, and there's a million things I haven't done. But just you wait, just you wait.
When he was 10, his father split, full of it, debt-ridden. 2 years later, see Alex and his mother bedridden, half dead, sitting in their own sick, the scent thick. And Alex got better, but his mother went quick.
That's one of my favorites too, to be honest. I think it's such a great introduction, and I love the way, like, when all the voices come in, and the you never back down, you never take your time, like.
And
I just love that part.
It feels like it's like for somebody like me who's trying to understand what this play is all about.
Yeah.
It does a lot of foreshadowing to suggest like what's going to come and what kind of conflicts are going to emerge.
Yeah, it even does that with the staging. Like I've seen a few videos, but the different characters, the way that they phrase things, because too in the musical there's all of the characters in Act 1, and then they have almost corresponding characters in Act 2, and so you even see that foreshadowing happening then.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it is a very good one.
Yep.
I think the thing with Hamilton is I go through a lot of different phases of liking songs, so depending what mood I'm in, like what characters I relate to more, there's just so many. I think ones that I keep on returning back to. I actually really love the song at the end of the first act, Nonstop.
Is non-stop. Gentlemen of the jury, I'm curious, bear with me. Are you aware that we're making history? This is the first murder trial of our brand new nation, the liberty behind deliberation. I intend to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt with my assistant counsel.
Co-counsel Hamilton, sit down. Our client Larry Weeks is innocent. Call your first witness. That's all you had to say.
Okay, one more thing.
Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Assume that attitude may be your doom.
Why do you write like you're running out of time?
Right day and night like you're running out of time.
Every day you fight like you're running out of time.
I think just all of the different melodies, and you really see that conflict between Burr and Alexander, and the demands being placed on him by Washington and people's expectations and his own expectations of himself versus the draw from Eliza to just be home and let their family be enough. You really see all the tensions kind of rising. And then I always love too when songs have all of the different melodies going at the same time, all of the different themes, and they sing in harmony together. I think that shows a lot of good musicianship. So that's definitely one I come back to. I also really love Quiet Uptown. It's a bit of a slower song, but especially after what happens beforehand, like it just resets the pace, and you really see Alexander's new outtake on life. It's, always a good classic as well. It's everything is just so good.
I also have to give two special shout outs to actually a really popular song from the musical that we haven't touched upon yet, but Helpless is really catchy. I really like Helpless. I love, just once again, the way it's
You're
arranged.
helpless. You just can't help.
I'm helpless.
You can't help but enjoy
You gotta
it.
look into the eyes. The sky's above me. And then I also have to give another shout out. I can't remember the name of the song, but I think it's the wedding song, the to the groom, to the bride.
Satisfied, where it tells it from
that's right.
Angelica's perspective.
And once again, the way that all the voices kind of come together, like, man, it just gives you chills. I just freaking love it.
And the two together too, like when you see Eliza's story of how she met Alexander and kind of their love story, and then you go back and you see Angelica's initial meaning of him and her thought process and how all of that happens. Like, you have to listen to the two together.
Yeah,
it's so good.
There are so many great songs. Like it is a hard question. There's like I could give you a top 10, but my shot would have to be number 1 easily. But so many good songs.
And finally, the last thing I want to ask. This is such a successful musical. Could this work as a movie?
They've actually talked about filming the original cast before they all left and releasing it, I think, within the next 5 years. So...
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to watch that.
There's a difference between watching with all due respect to even Broadway, there is a difference between watching basically a recording of a play and then actually seeing like an actual movie.
I think... See, it's tough because we've seen, they said years and years ago that Lord of the Rings was unfilmable. But yet they managed to find a way to make it work. And I get that's a book, this is a musical, but I've also seen lots of musicals that you kind of wonder, you're like, how are they going to pull this off? How are they going to do it? But I would hope that with a movie like Hamilton, you wouldn't have like a first-time director, you know, being like, oh, you've got this, right? Like they would clearly have someone who knew how to translate this properly. So I'm going to be optimistic and say, yes, they can turn this into a musical. I just think they need the right people. They also need the time, right? Sometimes some of the best movies are not rushed. They take a lot of time, especially with something as beloved as Hamilton. Don't rush this one. Take your time. We will wait, because the last thing we want is to wait less and go see a bad version of Hamilton. I would rather wait longer, wait 2 or 3 more years to get a really good version of Hamilton. So I think it can be done.
Taking more of Aaron Burr's philosophy on it, I see.
Sure, yeah. Does that make me the villain?
He was interviewed, and I keep saying he, Lin-Manuel, his name is hard for me to say, Lin-Manuel Miranda, was interviewed in 2016 asking about a movie, and he's like, yeah, sure, someday, but I really want to make sure everyone gets a chance to see it on stage first.
That's fair.
Which I think just speaks to like his passion for the project, but also emphasizing that this whole Hamilton thing, I'm putting my hands out to imagine this like a product.
Yeah.
But this product was made to be and intended to be seen on the stage. So I think that speaks to his character, that he's like, no, like, yeah, I could make a ton of money by turning this into a movie right away, but my vision for this is that it is meant to be seen on a stage. And
that's fair.
And they don't even want to broach the idea of a movie until it's actually had as much time on the stage as possible.
Had a good run.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think we've seen cases of like books being really popular, and then 2 years later there's a movie. So, and once again, I know books different from like seeing is far more accessible than going to see a musical. But yeah, I think at some point when it's time, I would love to see a movie version. But I also hope too to see it on stage as well. Hopefully next year here in Ottawa.
And again, like I haven't actually watched this whole musical, so I actually don't know like what the sets are like, and if it would allow for like, you know, a cinematic experience, or if it actually, because some musicals are very creative in how they use the stage as like a limited, you know, like they film a lot of scenes in the same locations, or you know, things like that. So I actually don't know if Hamilton would work better if it was like in a film where they could go anywhere. And
I think it's possible because there are certain battles that are fought in the first act, which I imagine like they probably get creative and figure out a way to do it on stage. But we've seen how incredible battles can be and how big and devastating they can be on the big screen. So I think they would have lots of fun with that, being able to actually show like, you know, like these battle-torn scenes and all that, but still having like musical numbers happen, kind of in a way. Les Mis did that a little
like
bit.
Avengers Endgame,
like Avengers Endgame. Except there's no, you know, I am Iron Man, I must fight. Get the gauntlet. But yeah, I think
someone
it's possible.
Please make that a musical.
Yeah, and better than what I was able to offer 5 seconds ago.
Imagine you're on an elevator with somebody who's never seen Hamilton before, and you're riding to, say, the 11th floor of a building, and it's an elevator that moves pretty fast, so you've got maybe 30 seconds with this person.
Okay.
What will you say to them to get them to check out Hamilton?
Do you have anything? You still thinking?
Well, I'm still thinking.
Okay, let's see. Let me try first here. So I got 30 seconds. I would first ask them, do you like musicals? And if they say yes, then I'd say great, because Hamilton's a great musical. If they say no, I'd say, well, you know what? Hamilton's still a great musical. This one might get you into musicals even if you don't like them. So I would say if you are a person who either appreciates musicals, appreciates just music in general, appreciates, oh God, yeah, this is tough. Appreciates kind of a new spin.
Oh, there's my door. Ding!
On an old, no, wait, 5 more seconds. If you appreciate a new spin on an old story, something that's going to kind of shine a light that maybe you hadn't really been a part of before, check out Hamilton, because really you will miss out if you miss out on Hamilton. And to be fair, even if they like don't care and they don't hear or listen to Hamilton, they're going to hear it from someone else in the same way that I heard it from 3 people before I finally sat down and listened to it.
All right, well, have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. See ya.
Oh, and I got off on the wrong floor. Yeah. I better go back on the elevator.
Right. Oh, good. I have a few more points to bring up.
No. Now I'm on the elevator.
I gotta have my chance.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going down. And hey, Banana Pancakes, you're on this elevator.
Oh, yeah. So just listen to this musical Hamilton. It's pretty interesting. Have you heard anything about it before?
Not a thing, no.
Well, let me tell you. Yeah, I think I would talk about the storytelling in it. I think the unique thing about Hamilton is if you appreciate art, if you appreciate good storytelling, even if you're not a fan of hip-hop, even if you're not a fan of musicals, which we've seen of people in both cases kind of with the fandom, everything about it is they appreciate the storytelling in it and the character development, the things that happen, how all of the different characters or stories are told, whether they're more of a minor character, a supporting character, or Alexander Hamilton, the main man himself. There's just really good storytelling woven in through everything, so I'd try to convince people based on that. So people listening, you should also listen to it.
Yep.
All right, so I've just given you guys some marketing experience. That's what we call an elevator pitch.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking it's like, an elevator pitch. I'm no good at these.
So there you go. If anything we've said today has gotten you excited about going to see Hamilton, check it out. Find the music. Maybe there's a production of it happening near where you live. It sounds like it's worth checking out. So there you go. We've given Hamilton its due. Now it's time to go into the backyard and look at our mail. Oh, wait, we can't because no one sent us mail again.
Guys, come on.
So I'm starting to feel a little hurt here. Ben the Movie Buff, you need to remind the people how to find us because clearly they're, not... Maybe we're being neglected. I don't know.
I will, Average Joe. Remember, don't throw away your shot. All right, guys, listen up. Here's how it goes. If you want to contact the show with a question or an idea for an episode, you can send us an email to
batcharpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bad Cookie Jar.
We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Music, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, or whatever you get your podcast. Oh, yeah, I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying. Share our posts on Facebook. You can tell I did not practice this at all. I just came up with this brilliant idea 5 seconds ago. Share our posts on Facebook and make sure to like our page because we want everyone to join us inside the Bat Jar.
Subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Hit that like button. Subscribe. Join the notification squad. Ring that bell. Write a review in your favorite platform.
Word.
We're on. And now we're good.
Yeah, so normally we would go into the Bat Jar at this point to pull a topic out for next time, but we're not going to do that because next week's going to be a very special episode. Actually, it's going to be one of those time travel-y kind of episodes because it's going to feature content that was recorded in the past, but for those listening, it'll feel like it's the present. So I'm actually going to do... well, I've already done it, but next week's episode, so it'll come to you as if it's the present, and then for us, it's the future.
Yeah.
So it's back from the future. No, it's not back from the... Anyway, point is, next week, I'm going to have one of our oldest special guests, somebody who has been on the show since episode 25.
Wow.
Cackles. Long-time listeners in the show will remember that Cackles is the one who does the theme music for our show.
Oh, yeah.
And Cackles and I had a conversation ranking the movie interpretations of Spider-Man.
Oh.
So if that is of interest to you, find out who we think is the best film version of Spider-Man. Come back to the Bad Sharp podcast next week. I mean, I already know what the result is because, again, I was part of that conversation, but I want to just tease it out for you guys. That'll be what we talk about next time. So please come back to the show to find out who is actually the best movie version of Spider-Man. And with that being said, we're getting towards the end of the show now, so we got to thank Banana Pancakes for making the time to be a part of the podcast today.
Yes, thank you.
Not a problem. Pleasure to be here.
Ben the Movie Buff referred to you as Banana Pancakes several times. So do you identify as a single banana pancake or multiple banana pancakes?
Oh, never thought about this. Probably multiple, actually.
That's right, yeah.
Pancakes.
Well, I'm not going to go back and edit in S's to say...
Yeah, just get her just going, and then just put it on banana pancake.
So for those who are noticing that as we were going along, don't worry, all is forgiven. She is indeed Banana Pancakes.
Yes.
There we go.
That's right.
Or BP for short.
BP.
So is there any nerdy or geeky things that you'd like to promote while you're here?
I mean, if we're hopping on the musical bandwagon, Dear Evan Hansen is a really good one to check out.
Yes, agreed.
Highly recommend.
And Ben the Movie Buff, it'll be Cackles next week, and then you'll be back after that.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to be talking in 2 weeks about the new film called The Kitchen.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
The next comic book film to come out this year. Mm-hmm. It's based on a 1970s era mob New York City thing where these mob wives take over the mob while their husbands are in prison. It takes place in Hell's Kitchen. That's why it's called The Kitchen. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's one of those comic book movies that's not, when you hear comic book film, you think superheroes.
Yeah.
So this is exciting because it's one of those instances where it's based on a comic book, but it shows how the comic book medium is more than just superheroes.
Oh yeah, it's pretty vast.
So, Banana Pancakes, next time there's something that is in your wheelhouse, we will definitely have you back. And
Awesome,
Ben the Movie
thanks.
Buff will be back in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Next week it'll be Cackles and I talking about the different movie versions of Spider-Man. So until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Ben the Movie Buff.
And this is Banana Pancakes.
Catch you on the flip side.
See you later.
Bye.